tell me if you've heard this story before. The first time you see it, it's in the YouTube cinematic. Maybe it's one of the official trailers, maybe it's just some gameplay footage. But whatever it is, it looks awesome. The elegance of the dance, the drama of the chase. It's a dogfight, and it comes with a promise. You could be in that pilot's seat. The game's name is War Thunder, of course, and it's free to play, so you install it. You fight your way through the initial learning curve, you unlock some iconic warbirds, you might actually be getting the hang of it, you think. But somehow, your gameplay still ends up looking like this.
You got a hole in your left wing! You got a hole in your left wing! You got a hole in your left wing! The left wing's been hit!
Sound familiar? Well, I'm here to tell you that it doesn't have to be this way, because while they might not be the main focus of this game, War Thunder is full of dogfights if you know where and how to look. So in this video, I want to explain the psychological metagame that surrounds dogfighting in War Thunder, and how you can use it to your advantage to actively construct the type of gameplay that you actually want. Now, first, I am going to put in a disclaimer. This is specifically advice for air realistic battles. I can see this advice translating decently well to Air Arcade, but it certainly won't carry over one-to-one, and that caveat applies doubly for Air Sim, where everybody's situational awareness is so drastically reduced. With that being said, I do find that dogfights are much more common in Sim to begin with, so the Sim players probably won't even need this video. Oh, and I'm only going to be talking about how to get into dogfights. Actually winning them, that's on you. With all that out of the way, let's start simple. What even is a dogfight? So the dictionary definition is a close-range duel between opposing military aircraft, and from this definition, we can immediately figure out a few necessary conditions that are required for a dogfight to even happen. So first, it's a close range duel, so you need to be in close proximity to your opponent for an extended period of time. And this means that the energy difference between you and your opponent, both speed and altitude, can't be too extreme, because then it would just turn into a boom and zoom.
Oh my god, bro. Oh, hell no, man.
Second, a dogfight is a duel, so you and one other opponent, not 3-on-1, not 1-on-3, because that wouldn't be a dog fight, that would be a dog pile.
Oh no!
And also, it can't be a situation where one of you is trying to run away the entire time, because it's a duel, it's a dance, and it takes two to tango. With all of this in mind, it's pretty obvious that your average Air RB furball is not a good environment for dogfighting. In fact, if all you're looking to do is get as many kills as possible, I actually suggest avoiding dogfights altogether. But you're here on this video, so presumably you actually want to participate in dogfights for their own sake, and if that's the case, this default scenario just isn't going to cut it. What I want to teach you instead is how to actively create alternative scenarios that are much more likely to result in a dogfight occurring. Doing this consistently, however, requires understanding player psychology. The key is this: nobody wants to start a fight at a disadvantage. This is the basic premise for pretty much everything else in this video. So therefore, in order for a dogfight to happen, you have to convince your opponent that they have a good chance at winning. You have to convince them to participate. And the easiest way to do that is to strategically give your opponent a temporary advantage. At the beginning of the match, the easiest way to do this is to isolate yourself. Get a bit of distance from your team, and then try to get someone on the enemy team to focus on you. If your opponent is confident, a lot of the time, just you being alone will be enough for them to try their luck in a dogfight. However, if you're too far above your opponent, most players will just run away when they see you. Because remember, nobody wants to start a fight at a disadvantage. What I like to do instead is to climb at a higher than optimal speed directly at the enemy, so 300 kilometers an hour IAS or higher in props. This makes it very likely that I will be below the enemy when I first meet them. This way, I'll be a more enticing target because I'm at an altitude disadvantage, while also keeping some speed to defend myself with once I do get attacked. Once you do have your opponent's attention, your next objective is to lead them away from their team to a quiet corner of the map where you can have your epic duel. You want to get far enough away from both teams so that it's unlikely for someone else to come and ruin your fun before the dogfight is over. Because remember, you simply cannot rely on other players to quote-unquote respect the 1v1. Now, as you're running away, you don't want to let your opponent get close enough for a shot, of course, but you also don't want them to lose interest. So I find about 1.5 to 3 kilometers is a good distance to maintain. If they start catching you too fast, you can dive away, and if you start pulling away too fast, you can convert your speed back into altitude to let them catch back up. Sometimes at this stage, you will have multiple opponents chasing you, but don't panic. I find that if you just run away for long enough, usually only the closest one ends up sticking around. Eventually, if you keep flying away from the fight like this, you'll get a good amount of separation from the main furball, say 5 kilometers or more from the nearest teammate or enemy. Alternatively, your opponent might really start committing to attacking you and you won't actually be able to get away anymore. And at that point, that is when you start your dogfight. Turn into your opponent and try to get them to maneuver with you to reduce the energy gap. Basically, this looks the same as baiting for an overshoot, because you're just trying to convince your opponent that they have a shot, so they stick on you for longer and lose more energy. As you can tell, this particular tactic leans heavily on your defensive flying skills, but I'll let you in on a secret. Dogfighting is a defensive tool to begin with, and it feels so much more satisfying when you turn the tables after starting the fight on the back foot. So, once you get into a fight, you'll be in one of 3 scenarios. Scenario 1, which is kind of what I just showed you, the opponent maintains their energy advantage and tries to keep booming and zooming you. In this case, you'll just want to keep baiting for overshoots and try to hit them while they climb away, like I demonstrated here. It's kind of a boring way to play, but if they keep at it for long enough, this usually transitions to Scenario 2, assuming you don't just shoot them down. Scenario 2 is the opponent starts turning with you instead of trying to maintain their energy advantage, either because they get impatient or they bleed too much speed. This is what you really want, because then
It's a dogfight.
Scenario 3, though, is the annoying one. In this scenario, the opponent realizes that you somewhat know what you're doing and decides to run away. Unfortunately, since they're starting with the energy advantage, there's really nothing you can do to counter this except heckle them in the chat and try to provoke them. But at the end of the day, this is just kind of unavoidable because, like I said before, a dogfight does require both participants to want to stay in it. Despite all this, the strategy I just described is the most consistent way that I've found to actively fish for dogfights in props all the way up to early jets. However, I recognize it can be frustrating when your opponents just don't want to play ball. So an alternative approach is to play the game as normal until you find yourself in the following situation. It's the late game, There's only a handful of enemies left, and your own teammates have mostly gone back to base or started ground pounding. In this scenario, player psychology is working massively more in your favor. Your opponents will be out for blood because they know their opportunities for scoring in the game are rapidly dwindling. Because of this, they might even take the dogfight at an energy disadvantage just to try to do something. To take maximum advantage of this, I tend to loiter around the enemy side of the map in the late game if I know there are enemy fighters remaining. The key here is to catch them early as they're flying back to the battlefield after rearming, so you get first dibs before your teammates. However, you want to be careful not to camp so close to the enemy airfield that your opponent feels too threatened to actually leave. Sometimes your opponent might actually already be above you at this point of the match, but then you can just use the same strategy as before to try to bait them into losing their energy and starting a dogfight with you. I'll go into some specific detail for this example so you can get a sense of my thought process. So this specific opponent was incredibly patient. They stayed at altitude and stuck with pure boom and zoom for so long that both my squad mates actually ran out of fuel and had to RTB. Thankfully, I took a bit more, so I just keep trying to bait for overshoots. Eventually, after many attempts, the pilot loses patience and gives up their energy advantage in order to try to stick this rolling scissors with me. And at this low of a BR, it's honestly not a bad call, but unfortunately for them, I am a little bit better than most beginners, and this matchup is one that the 109 will lose if it keeps turning like this. With the way that my opponent is flying though, I figure they have enough game sense to recognize that they've made a mistake, and if I let them make the right decisions, they'll probably just run away. So, I use the fact that I have pretty much infinite machine gun ammo on this thing to try to make them panic and keep making bad decisions. Their defensive flying is honestly pretty good. Extremely unorthodox if nothing else, so it makes them hard to predict. But I'm not trying for the kill shot yet, I'm just trying to get them slow. And even at this point, after losing all this energy, the 109 could still have just pointed the nose down and outrun me. But instead, they take the fight vertical. Maybe because they're freaking out a little from the thousands of rounds of 30 cal flying around their cockpit. At this speed, that is a fatal mistake. And this is a good opportunity to talk about matchups, or rather why I don't think matchups are actually that important. So, obviously some planes are going to have a better time in a dogfight than others. Assuming pilots have equal skill, we can theory craft about what planes would win in what matchup, until the sun burns out. But generally speaking, the rule of thumb is dogfights tend to favor light fighters that turn really tight and have good stall control. So things like your Spitfire or A6M0. You might have heard of these planes referred to as quote-unquote turn fighters. I don't love that term because it implies that this is the only type of fighting that they can do, which is certainly not the case. Anyway, here's the catch. Everybody else also knows that Spitfires and Zeros are good at dogfighting. And remember, nobody wants to start a fight at a disadvantage. So, if you're flying one of these planes, yeah, you're going to win a lot of the time if you get into a dogfight, but you're not going to get into many dogfights, because nobody's going to want to start a dogfight with you in the first place. So instead, here's my advice. Have a little fun with it. Dogfight in heavy fighters. Dogfight in ground attackers. Dogfight in the Sunderland Mk.XIVe. You'll lose, maybe a lot, maybe even most of the time, but you'll also learn a lot, and when you win, it will be hilarious. Anyway, that's pretty much everything I have to say on the... Oh, hold on. Do you hear that? Ah. Right. So, you want to dogfight at high tier. Well, remember when I specifically said that the baiting tactic from earlier works for props up to early jets? That's for a very specific reason. Missiles. Missiles make that baiting tactic completely obsolete. First, missiles mean you can't run. Even an AIM-9B will make it so that you cannot maintain your speed while in front of your opponent, because you'll have to turn to dodge it. And the better the missiles get, the more of a death sentence turning your ass to your enemy becomes. Second, missiles mean that nowhere on the map is safe from third-party interference. As an extreme example, the R-27ER has over a 50-kilometer launch range and can relock as many times as the pilot can spam their lock button. Now, I can hear some of you yelling in the comments, "Jam the Wes, jam the Wes," but that's not actually relevant here, because what I mean is that with missiles in the picture, actively constructing an environment that fosters dogfighting becomes basically impossible. You can still engage in dogfights when the opportunity arises, of course, but you won't be able to create those opportunities yourself like you can at lower tiers. Therefore, my only advice for finding dogfights at high tier is to try to survive to the endgame, and then you can look for opportunities for 1v1 combat. You'll have to survive to the merge, of course, but if you can do that, a dogfight is actually guaranteed, because whoever tries to disengage first is probably going to receive a telephone pole-shaped present delivered directly to their engine turbine. Otherwise, let's just hope Gaijin adds bullet hell as a permanent game mode at some point. Okay, that's everything for real this time, so let's do a quick recap. War Thunder RRB is pure chaos by default, and chaos is not a good environment for dogfighting. So if you want dogfights, you need to simplify the variables somehow. At lower tiers, you can do this right at the start of the game by baiting an opponent to focus on you and then dragging them to a quiet corner of the map for a duel. This technique is the most consistent, but it has two drawbacks. First, you start at a moderate energy disadvantage, and second, it takes quite a lot of time to set up. Alternatively, you can just wait for the late game and hunt for opportunities for 1v1s. This is pretty much the only way to actively look for dogfights at top tier. However, this requires a match in which neither team steamrolls the other, so luck is a much bigger factor. Overall, if dogfights are your thing, the old adage holds true. Low tier, fun tier. Anyway, what do you think? Do you have any ways of getting dogfights that I've missed in this video? Let me know in the comments. In the meantime, here's a few more dogfights for you to enjoy. Good luck out there.